Before your child can talk, before they can reason, before they can remember, even before they're born, their brain is asking two core questions. Am I safe, and can I trust you? The answer to these questions becomes the blueprint that they will use to build relationships, establish their coping styles, and even shape aspects of their personality. That blueprint is their attachment style. And in this video, we'll talk about what it is, how it's formed, how it impacts development, and how you can support your child. So what is attachment? At the heart of attachment is something psychologists call internal working models. A working model is simply the brain's understanding of what something is and how it works, and is informed by observation and experience. Imagine being dropped into a city you've never been to before. No map, no directions. You'd start figuring it out by trial and error. You'd notice which streets feel safe, which ones lead you nowhere, and which routes actually get you to where you need to go. Soon, you'd have a mental map you rely on every time you move through the city. And eventually, you stop thinking about it consciously. You have formed a working model of the city. This is similar to how the brain learns to understand and navigate relationships, beginning in infancy and continually developing throughout childhood as the brain becomes more capable of social and cognitive tasks. Children are born into a world that they do not and cannot understand yet. To navigate it successfully, they must learn through experience who is safe, who they can rely on, and who will meet their needs. And they explore this through attachment behaviors, crying to see if somebody will come, reaching out for comfort, or seeking proximity. Over time, children begin to unconsciously pick up on caregiving patterns. Who responds quickly and consistently, and who is unpredictable, who soothes and who withdraws. Slowly, they form their own mental map of relationships. And once these maps or working models are formed, children use them to interpret relationships, to guide their behavior, and even to shape their interactions to confirm what they already expect about themselves and others. A child who is treated with interest, empathy, and concern will expect their caregiver to be trustworthy and reliable. When they feel frustrated or need help, they'll be more likely to seek support, to tolerate discomfort, and to stay engaged rather than shutting down. These behaviors invite further connection, which reinforces their belief that people will be there for them. In contrast, a child who is treated unpredictably will begin to expect rejection and inconsistency. When frustrated, they might withdraw or escalate as an unconscious strategy to test the relationship by asking, "Am I worth caring for?" And these behaviors can unintentionally push others away or create tension, reinforcing the child's belief that relationships are unsafe. It's important to note that these attention-seeking behaviors are not deliberate manipulation. Rather, these are unconscious bids for attention, connection, and care. Now, before we dive too deep into the 4 attachment styles and their characteristics, it's important that we understand the function and nature of attachment in the first place. As is the case with many human tendencies, the primary function of attachment is survival. Unlike some other living creatures, human infants are uniquely helpless and incapable of meeting their own needs. They can't regulate their emotions, their body, or their stress on their own. They must rely on their caregivers for survival and therefore engage in attachment behaviors like crying to draw attention to their needs. Another function of attachment is what psychologists refer to as a secure base. When children trust their caregivers, they feel more confident in their ability to explore the world around them, knowing that if they face a distressing situation, they will have a secure base to return to, one that will comfort and soothe them, take interest in them, and help them navigate their emotions while still supporting their exploration and autonomy. Attachment is also the foundation for emotional regulation. Again, infants are incapable of self-regulation. Their nervous systems are too immature for that. When adults go into fight or flight, we have the option of fighting or fleeing. But when an infant goes into fight or flight, they can't do anything about it at all. And if left unhelped, or worse, abused or neglected, this turns into chronic stress without recovery and will disrupt development. However, when a safe, regulated caregiver is able to intervene, the child can regulate through the caregiver. This is called co-regulation and is the basis of self-regulation, which the child will use once their brains have become capable of it. Whether or not these purposes are fulfilled depends greatly on interactions that the child has with their environment, and especially their caregivers. These interactions influence the working model of relationships that the infant creates. To better understand these working models, we must go back to 1970, when psychologist Mary Ainsworth conducted an experiment called the Strange Situation. The premise of the study was pretty straightforward. A child and their caregiver enter an unfamiliar room. Then, a series of separations and reunions take place, during which the experimenter observes how the child responds. They're observed with the caregiver, in the absence of the caregiver, during the reunion with the caregiver, and in the presence of a stranger. The results? 3 main attachment styles were observed and identified by Ainsworth: secure attachment, insecure avoidant attachment, and insecure ambivalent or resistant attachment. A fourth attachment style, disorganized attachment, was identified and observed years later. Now, before we move on, I do want to point out some limitations with the study. It was primarily focused on Western middle-class families, and we now know that cultural differences can have a major impact on attachment behaviors, especially the differences between individualist and collectivist cultures. Also, it can be argued that some attachment behaviors may be more about temperament than attachment style. And lastly, attachment styles can change. They're not set in stone, and you can have more than one. In this study, about 70% of the infants displayed secure attachment tendencies. These babies were willing to explore the new environment when in the presence of their caregiver. Upon separation from the caregiver, they would become distressed, and when reunited, they would be able to be soothed. They would display some fear in the presence of the stranger, but if the caregiver was also present, they would engage with the stranger playfully. Secure attachment develops in children whose internal working models of relationships are influenced by caregivers that respond with support, safety, and consistency. This leads to children who feel safe seeking comfort and expressing their full range of emotions. Their internal message is, "I trust you." About 15% of the babies in this study displayed avoidant attachment tendencies. Some of them would explore the new environment, but did so independently from their caregivers rather than depending on them as a secure base. They displayed little to no distress upon separation and would ignore or avoid the caregiver when they returned. They also did not exhibit any more emotional closeness with their caregiver as they did with the stranger. Their internal working model of relationships develops around the expectations that caregivers will be emotionally unavailable and unresponsive. Because their caregivers struggle to tolerate or respond effectively to their emotional needs, the child adapts by minimizing emotional expression and increasing emotional distance. Their internal message is, "I don't need you." The last 15% of babies in this study displayed ambivalent or resistant attachment tendencies. These babies explored the new environment very little. They were terrified of the stranger, and when separated from their caregiver would become intensely distressed. When the caregiver returned, they would initially seek comfort but then resist or reject it, making it pretty difficult for them to be soothed. Their internal working model of relationships is based on the expectation that caregivers will be inconsistent or unpredictable. This is shaped by repeated experiences in which sometimes the caregiver is attentive and emotionally responsive, and sometimes they are misattuned and unavailable. Over time, the child learns that care is possible but unreliable and often requires a lot of effort. Because they can't accurately predict how or when their needs will be met, they adapt by amplifying their emotional expression, overemphasizing the reliance on their caregiver, and preferring proximity over exploration. Their internal message is, "Don't leave me." While not included in this study, years later, disorganized attachment was observed as another form of insecure attachment. Disorganized infants explore new environments very little and often appear fearful, confused, or disoriented. During separation from the caregiver, they become highly distressed, and upon the caregiver's return, they may initially reach out for comfort and then freeze, collapse, turn away, or disengage. Their internal working model is based on fear without resolution. This pattern develops when they identify their caregiver as both a source of comfort and a source of alarm due to frightening, or severely dysregulated parenting. As a result, the child cannot form a predictable expectation about how to gain safety. Over time, the child learns that closeness is necessary for survival, but proximity itself activates fear. And unlike ambivalent attachment, where emotional activation is used as a strategy to maintain connection, disorganized attachment is categorized by the lack of a coherent strategy. Their internal message is, "I need you, but I fear you." Now, let's talk about how these attachment styles develop neurologically and biologically. When the brain begins developing in the womb, it builds from the bottom up, starting with the most basic structures like the brainstem that helps with maintaining autonomic functions like breathing and heart rate. Then comes the limbic system, something that's highly involved in emotional regulation. And lastly is the cortex, the cognitive thinking part of the brain. So what does this mean for infants and kids? Well, their emotional center is online long before their thinking center is. This is why their threat response systems are highly active, but their ability to self-regulate is still non-existent. And the brain's development, especially at this stage, is extremely experience-driven. When experiences are repeated, the pathways involved in those experiences are reinforced. And since during infancy, nearly all of these experiences happen within the context of caregiving, interactions with the caregiver shape emotional regulation, stress response, and their sense of safety. So this leads to a common question I'm asked. Why do these early experiences matter so much if kids won't even remember them once they become adults? The answer to this lies in the difference between explicit and implicit memory. Explicit or declarative memory is conscious and verbalizable. These are memories you can readily bring to mind and talk about. The encoding of these explicit memories are highly dependent on interactions between the hippocampus and the cortex, areas that are still immature in early childhood. This is why most people have little to no recollection of their life before 4 or 5 years old. Implicit memory, however, is unconscious and automatic. It can shape expectations, emotional reactions, and behavioral patterns without conscious awareness, and it relies a lot more on brain structures involved in behavioral conditioning, areas that mature much earlier and are crucial in a child's learning of what is safe and what is not. Because of this, the child's brain is capable of learning through experience even when conscious memory networks are not yet fully online. In fact, some research on animals has shown that when the amygdala is damaged, threat responses are eliminated. But when other areas like the cortex or hippocampus are damaged, but the amygdala is left intact, the brain still responds to emotionally triggering stimuli. So what does this mean? We don't need to consciously remember that something is dangerous in order for our brain to recognize that it's unsafe. This is why these early attachment experiences are so important. Children are unconsciously and implicitly encoding memories based on their early experiences with their caregivers. And if these early experiences are dangerous or unsafe, it influences the child's internal working model of relationships, which then influences their ability to form relationships in the future. And because so much of this is happening at the level of the nervous system beneath conscious awareness, interventions and therapies that are more brain-based, body-based, and play-based can be much more effective in the healing of these attachment disruptions. So, what can you do to foster secure attachment with your child or heal attachment disruptions that have already taken place? Number one is to focus on effort and repair rather than perfection. Nobody is 100% consistent, and ruptures in relationships are bound to happen. By focusing on repair, you and your child can learn that recovery from mistakes is possible and trust can be maintained. Don't be afraid to apologize, to take responsibility, and to build consistency even in small ways. Number two, because attachment is deeply implicit and largely non-verbal, connection with the body is crucial for healing. Practices that cultivate awareness of bodily sensations, regulation, and physical safety can help repair attachment disruptions. This can look like physical presence, safe physical connection, and practicing mindfulness. And lastly, get curious. Attachment security grows when caregivers are interested in the child's emotional world, not just their behaviors. Curiosity helps you to practice understanding feelings, intentions, and needs, which strengthens regulation, empathy, and trust over time. Thank you for joining me today. I care a lot about this topic, and I hope it was informative. Make sure you like and subscribe for more information on child development. And comment below if you have a question or a topic you'd like me to cover. Thank you for watching. Until next time.